When should I start homeschooling my kindergartner? This is a question that gets asked a lot. And chances are, if you found this video, you're either probably the parent of a young child who's thinking about starting homeschool and wondering when is the right time to start, or you could be a parent who's already been through making this decision. And if so, I would love for you to share in the comments what things helped you decide when was the right time to start homeschooling. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Leanne, a homeschool mom of 2 kids and a music educator. For several years, I've been part of different online groups where I see this question come up quite often for people asking for advice on when to start homeschooling their kindergarten-age child. Now, I will go ahead and confess to you, about the time my oldest kid turned 3 years old and the idea of homeschooling was just starting to enter my mind, I kind of went a little bit crazy. Like, I was asking for advice from people, just anybody who was willing to listen to me and answer all my questions. And honestly, I probably drove a lot of them crazy because I had so many questions. But I think that those moms could really tell I had the best intentions in my heart. I really wanted to get this thing right because homeschooling felt like such a big decision, and it is. So I'm really thankful that I had so many moms in those early days who I could just glean wisdom from. As we tackle this topic of kindergarten today, I want to leave you with 5 things to consider, and then I'm going to also at the end be sharing some about my own experience. So when people ask this question of when to start homeschooling kindergarten, they're really asking 2 separate things. First, what age do I need to register my child for kindergarten? And second, at what age should I start introducing some type of formal kindergarten curriculum? So the first part of the question is pretty easy to answer. You need to make sure you go online and check out your state guidelines for what is the mandatory age to begin kindergarten. I don't know the answer to all 50 states, but I'm going to assume that most states require kids to start schooling by age 6, if not sooner. Now, where it does become a little bit tricky is if you have a child with a summer birthday, like I do. And at that point, you're really making the same type of decision that a parent would if they were sending their kids to public school, right? Do I want my kid to be the youngest in their class or the oldest in their class? The good news is that thankfully, grade level doesn't really matter when you're homeschooling. It's really just a label. Now we're coming to the second part of this question. Okay, I figured out what age to register my child for kindergarten, but when do I actually start teaching them kindergarten? Is 4 too young? Is 6 too old? Is 5 somehow this magical, perfect age that every kid should start learning? I want to pause here for a moment and make a pretty obvious statement. And I know it sounds cliche, but the reality is that you have been homeschooling them from the very beginning. Day 1, when they were born, you became their primary teacher just by living life together, right? Again, I know it sounds cliche, but I wanted to say that, first of all, to give you some reassurance that you do have what it takes to teach your child at home. And also, just to relieve some of the pressure that we often feel where it's like there has to be some big, ceremonious, official start date to their education. No, you have been homeschooling them from the beginning, and you get to decide when you want to start gently introducing some of these more formal skills. Let's jump back to the original question. When should I start homeschooling my kindergartner? I'm going to give you 5 things today that I want you to consider as you think through this decision. First, your child's maturity level. Second, their interest and readiness level. Third, your own personal motivation. Fourth, their size and physical development. And fifth, how will this affect them long term? Think several years down the road. When we think about a child's maturity level, I want to be careful not to make too many blanket statements because I realize this is going to be very kid dependent, right? They're all different. I know a lot of times we tend to think that girls are ready for school sooner than boys because boys might be less mature and much more physically active, but that's not always the case. It really is dependent on your individual child. And I would say this is especially important to think about if you're going to put them in some type of co-op situation where they're going to have other teachers besides you. So I know when I was teaching in public school many years ago, and I had kindergartners coming in every year to my music classes, I really saw the full spectrum, right? There were some kids who you could just tell they were primed and ready to go for school. And there were other kids who, for lack of a better term, were still very babyish. And you could just tell something about them and their development, they weren't quite ready yet. Next, I want you to think about your child's readiness level for kindergarten or their interest level as well. Now, I will go ahead and confess my own mistake that I made with my firstborn, right? Because the firstborn's always the guinea pig, unfortunately. But back then, around age 5, he was, and actually still is, a very compliant kid. So if that looked like me giving him a worksheet of ABCs to work on, he would do it very willingly. But that doesn't necessarily mean that his brain was ready for that type of information. So I can't give you a perfect answer here about your child's readiness level. You know them best, but I do just want to caution you on that just because they will obey your directions doesn't mean that they're actually at a developmentally ready position. Third, I want you to think about your own personal intentions for starting kindergarten with your kid. Is it truly because you're excited and you're feeling ready to start teaching them? Or could it possibly be that you're feeling some outside pressure from other people? Because that is a very real thing that happens, especially for those of us who are first-time homeschoolers and we really are kind of breaking outside the normal mold of what other people do. Sometimes that comes in the form of comments and questions, maybe from family members or well-intentioned friends. It can even be, the grocery store clerk that asks your kid if they're in school today or what grade they're in. Really, I'm just trying to encourage you to give yourself a gut check and go, are my feelings about starting kindergarten coming from a positive place or from maybe some negative outside pressure? Okay, these last 2 points are going to be things to think about as your child grows up. So this first one I want to mention is, what is their size and physical development? What does that look like? It's not so much a big deal when your children are young, right? Because they're not already at the point where they're comparing themselves to their peers, but it does start to matter a good bit more as they get older and they're put into different types of social groups. So again, whether that's a co-op class or especially like a sports team, I know for boys especially, this can be a really big deal. They don't want to always feel like they're the smallest one, the shortest one, the slowest one on the team. And so depending on what grade level you've chosen to put them in or when you have started them in kindergarten, it can affect them in some ways further down the road. The last thing is we're going to project our kids' future 12 years, 13 years down the road when they're about to graduate. So you could, like me, be faced with the decision of, am I going to have my kid graduate when they're 17, about to turn 18, or 18, about to turn 19? And this is not an easy thing to think about. Ultimately, here's what we decided to do with our oldest child who has a summer birthday. So he had been attending a preschool, and when he reached age 5 and graduated preschool, I did go ahead and begin using some very light kindergarten curriculum with him, basic things in reading and math. But I chose to wait to register him until the following school year when he turned age 6. It does get a little bit tricky, right? Because that meant that for the first several years of homeschooling, he was always working a grade level above where I said he was on paper. And it really wasn't that hard to explain to him because I would just say things like, well, we stretched out your kindergarten, we gave you 2 years of kindergarten. It's like, oh, okay. And I will also say we've got a ton of friends who have done the same thing, especially with their boys with summer birthdays. They would wait until age 6 to officially register, even if that meant they had already started some book work at home earlier than that. My child is now in middle school, and this has just been our experience, but it felt like somewhere around probably grade 4 is when things kind of started to level out, and I felt more confident in my decision that yes, I made the right choice. He seems to be now at the appropriate grade level that I think he should be. And how I've thought this through long term for his education is it does mean that he will graduate when he is 18, about to turn 19. And personally, I'm fine with that. I think that it's always been part of my personal philosophy. I'm not trying to rush them through childhood, right? I want to give them plenty of time to develop at their own pace. And so I'm totally cool with that he graduates as almost a 19-year-old. On the other hand, if we get to, high school age level and he is starting to show some real motivation that he wants to graduate a year early, I think that's entirely feasible. And it seems like that's an easier option to explore, an early graduation, versus had we done it the opposite way and he didn't seem ready for graduation yet. As I start to wrap up this topic, I just really want to reiterate to you that this is a very personal, child-specific decision. So just because we chose to do it one way because we felt like that was best for our family and our kid, you have your own unique scenario. And that really is why I would love to hear from some of the other moms who would comment on this and share kind of your thought process and how you came to make your own decision. Regardless of whatever age you decide to start your child in homeschool kindergarten, here are a few pieces of advice that I want to give you that will serve your child well into their future. The first thing is start simple. And this is for their benefit, but also for your benefit. Again, don't try and make it this giant thing like you're sending them off to college all of a sudden. This really is just them transitioning into the next phase of childhood. Read aloud, read aloud, read aloud. And don't ever stop, even as they get older and become independent readers. Spend less time focusing on the what and the how you're going to teach them kindergarten, and really focus more on just developing some good learning routines. It could be something as simple as we just start by every morning at 10 o'clock, we take our snack outside on a picnic blanket and we read some library books together. That could literally be the start of kindergarten for you. Finally, and this is the most important thing I can tell you, make sure you allow plenty of time for them to play. Play is still important at all ages, honestly, but especially for these little kids, just because we're starting some type of formal schooling with them doesn't mean that play gets pushed to the side. Remember how much they learn through their play. I'm going to wrap this up with one of my favorite quotes that has always stuck with me, and it says, "There is no prize for finishing childhood first." I want you to think about that, moms. All right, best of luck in your homeschooling journey. If I can ever help you out with anything or you have questions, please be sure to drop those in the comments below and make sure that you're subscribed to Morning Basket Music. Thanks so much for watching.